Hello everyone, my name is Henry Zelenak. I am a music audio technology major at SUNY Schenectady in my sophomore year. Today I will be speaking with Charlie Post, class of '93. After graduating from SUNY Schenectady with his AAS in music business, Charlie went on to pursue numerous roles in the music industry, eventually ending up where he is today, as recording engineer for the Chicago Symphony Orchestra and owner at Post Productions Audio in Chicago, Illinois. The former role has earned Charlie a Grammy nomination in the category of Best Engineered Classical Album for his audio engineering on the 2018 Chicago Symphony Orchestra's performance of Shostakovich's Symphony No. 13, conducted by Riccardo Muti. Thank you for speaking with me today, Charlie.
Thank you, Henry. It's my pleasure.
So, you went to SUNY Schenectady for music business. What are some major takeaways that you got from that program, and what it really helped you going through that program that you took away with you later in your career, or that really helped you in your career?
Sure. First of all, on a most basic level, I really learned to hone my musicianship skills. I had fantastic lessons by then saxophone professor and clarinet professor Brett Weary, and I played in the jazz ensemble under Dr. Meckley, who went on to become the director of the department. And I was singing in the chorus as well as the a cappella chorus. So I really honed my musicianship skills, which have helped immensely in getting to where I've gone in my career at this point. Also, Dr. Meckley's music history class really got all of his students really engaged in the study of orchestral music. Before then, I had heard some symphonies, of course. I had seen Albany Symphony, and my elementary school had a woodwind quintet in, which made me interested in playing the French horn. Of course, when I got to school later on and they gave me the list of instruments, they said saxophone, and my eyes lit up and my ears lit up, and I thought, ooh. So anyway, and I still play, as you can see by the instruments behind me. But yeah, Schenectady gave me a really good foundation as a musician, and I hadn't realized before getting into the program how good the music program is and was at the time. I really had no idea, even being from Schenectady and living there all my life.
Brett Weary recently retired. We got a shout out to him. He did conduct the woodwind ensemble there for many years, and he's infamous for it. So yeah, I can definitely see what you're talking about as from my perspective as a current student. So that takes me to my next question, which is, how did you decide on choosing music business as your major at SUNY Schenectady, and really how did you choose that path for a career?
Right. Well, I didn't choose the path as a career until I finished my studies at Schenectady. And that's when I realized I had worked for about a year and a half before going back to school. And when I continued my education, I went to SUNY Fredonia. But I was looking through catalogs because the internet really wasn't a thing at the time. I was looking through college catalogs and saw that there was a sound recording technology program at Fredonia. And maybe it's just I go by gut feelings, but those gut feelings that I have always pay off in the end. And I saw the description of the course program and thought, wow, that sounds fantastic. It sounds like a perfect melding of my interest in technology and my interest in music. So to go back to answer the first part of the question, I knew early on I didn't want to become involved in music performance. I love playing. Don't get me wrong, I just didn't see a path for a career, particularly in classical saxophone. And I have tremendous respect for music educators, but didn't really want to be a music teacher myself. So most of my colleagues in the music program wanted to be a music educator or a performer professionally. And I thought I wanted to be directly involved with music, but not be the musician or the teacher myself. So that's sort of what steered me towards sound recording and getting involved with the music industry and the other side of the glass, as we say.
Right. And the role of musician is just as important as the role of recording engineer or mixer or mastering engineer, because without the musician, you wouldn't really have anything to do. You wouldn't have any work as an audio engineer. But, that's some good points there that both, there's a multifaceted approach there, which you can go in either towards music education or music performance, maybe work for an orchestra, or become a soloist. But, there's also the equally lucrative side of audio engineering, which is, a similar path to what I'm taking as a student at SUNY Schenectady. I considered, a performance major, and then I considered the audio engineering major that they have now, which is the program's called Music Audio Technology. It includes audio recording classes and classes in live sound and all that. So as you progress through your time at SUNY Schenectady and then later at SUNY Fredonia, did you always know that you wanted to work as a recording engineer? Because the music industry is huge, and there's many roles that you could have filled. Recording engineer is relatively specific. So was there anything that really pushed you in that direction, or did you make that conscious decision on your own?
It's a very good question. It's a good point. I think I knew that's exactly what I wanted to do, that I wanted to be a recording engineer. And at some point, my plan A, so to speak, was to graduate from Fredonia, move to New York City, work in a recording studio, a major commercial recording studio, and eventually become a producer. And my interests at the time were really towards jazz. I really wanted to be a jazz producer and sort of work my way up through the studio system and get there. And it's funny because I was on that path and was working at one of the major facilities, one of the major commercial studios in New York City for a few years. But as I was there, I started to see changes in the music industry, and I wanted to really be an apprentice under an engineer who I worked with and respected with, and I certainly had exposure to a lot of them, but the fact is that I was working with a different engineer on every session, and there was not a lot of consistency in that. I wasn't seeing a lot of, I was learning a lot, but there weren't any real fostering, I guess is the word, opportunities where I was working with the same engineer all the time and working towards a goal and eventually able to take over for that engineer and work my way up to producer. So when I was presented with the option to come over to the studio management side, I took that.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. It sounds like a very organic sort of approach that happened. You didn't have any specific role model that pushed you there, but you had a drive to get to where you are. So you currently work year-round as audio engineer for the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. How did you end up in that position? That's a great role.
Thank you. And it's a fantastic orchestra. I don't want to go too far without saying that. My career took a couple of left turns, and one of them was actually after I stopped working at Avatar Studios as a staff engineer. I took on a role at Manhattan School of Music, which is an excellent school for music in New York. And I was doing classical recording there and really enjoyed it. But every time the orchestra recordings came around, I got really excited because I don't know what it was, but there's something about full orchestra. Maybe it's the tonality of the orchestra and all the harmonics and the fullness of the orchestration. It's always fascinated me. And when I was at Schenectady, actually, Dr. Meckley got us so interested in learning about all these symphonies. And he was always, a huge fan of Mahler and Bruckner symphonies, and got me so interested. And this is such a music geek thing to say. I'm glad this is the audience here. But I would borrow scores from the SCCC at the time, the music library, and get a CD out and listen to Mahler symphonies at home just for fun and read through in the score. And you know what? That became directly applicable to my position now. So, that wasn't a bad thing to do. But getting back to your question, I knew I wanted to get back to engineering, and I knew I wanted to work in classical music at that point. And I befriended an engineer who worked at Hit Factory where I was. And he was exactly the role model I think I was looking for. But anyway, that role model, Silas Brown, I ended up working with for years, and he taught me some new recording software, which I hadn't seen before. And he eventually set me up, unbeknownst to me, on an informal interview at a record label who was working on exclusively new music. So all this music that brand new pieces that had never been heard by anyone in the world before. And I became their editing engineer for 5 years while doing remote recording on the side with my own company, Post Productions Audio. So that's how I got back into classical. And then at some point, he hooked me up with another engineer who was the director of audio at the Tanglewood Music Center out in Western Massachusetts, the summer home of the Boston Symphony Orchestra. And that's really when I got interested. We were recording, of course, chamber music in the smaller hall there. But when I got to go over to the shed, the Kusevitsky Music Shed, about an hour away, and if you haven't been there, please go when it reopens, hopefully this summer. I'd go over to the shed and mix the orchestra for the people in the lawn seats. So now you're taking a live sound approach, but you're actually reinforcing the orchestra, of which you'd barely hear out in the lawn seats. And 12,000 people are privy to any little mistake you make, or if you do a great job, they're hearing, they're hearing the orchestra, they think organically, but you're really recreating what they would be hearing if they could hear the orchestra several hundred feet from the stage. It was always a blast. It was always challenging and musically rewarding.
Right, and you make some really great points there that I think people, might not really consider when they think about an audio engineering degree or a music technology degree like is offered at SUNY Schenectady, or, going the other route of music performance or an arts degree. At SUNY Schenectady, we're required to take the first year of the arts degree as associates and applied science majors. We still have to take those what they call basic musicianship classes, because you should be able to read a score, you should be able to interpret things musically and understand things in a musical sense as well as a technological sense. It's not just throwing up some microphones, plugging them in, and then just manning the board. You have to also understand, what's happening musically at that time, and having an understanding of music and being able to sight read and play an instrument even are invaluable. So thanks for making that point too. So you've been nominated for a Grammy Award for your audio engineering on the Chicago Symphony Orchestra's 2018 performance of Shostakovich's Symphony No. 13. Of course, there's an enormous amount of work that goes into producing a recording like this, from setting up the microphones and preparing the session and writing up an input sheet to actually recording the session and then mixing and mastering it in post-production. So what was your reaction when you learned that you had been nominated? And as a classical music aficionado, what makes this recording really special to you?
Oh boy, these are fun questions. So I had actually gotten into a bike crash and had some injuries from it. And I was actually on my way to having a surgery as a follow-up to one of those injuries. I was trying to watch the live stream on my phone in the back of a lift, and my phone just started getting flooded with text messages and phone calls. And it was relatively early in the morning, so it was like, it felt really good. And just thinking back to the recording itself, I remember, so these are live performances that happen at Symphony Center. And I remember recording them, and this goes back to, this is the beginning of the season in 2018, so September 2018. This is the first week of concerts, in fact. And I'm sitting there at night listening to these performances and getting chills. And that, although it can happen, it doesn't happen that much. I'm very critical about what I hear. And, there's a number of factors that just have to be right, for lack of a better word. And the orchestra sounded fantastic. The soloist was great. The piece is moving, to put it lightly. The Shostakovich piece is so heavy, but so beautiful in so many ways. Shostakovich's sense of humor is strewn throughout. And the chorus also sounded great. So you've got this huge combination of factors. And then the fact that Irina Shostakovich's widow was in the house as a guest of Maestro Muti. So you have this sort of synergy with all these fantastic elements happening at the same time. And I was happy with my recording balances. So I thought I thought this has to become a commercial release. I'll be really sad if it doesn't. And the world needs to hear this. It's so beautiful. It needs to be heard. So when I heard about the nomination, I just thought, oh, this is fantastic. So happy for myself, but really happy that the world gets to hear this piece.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of special factors really went into that. Having Shostakovich's his widow in the house listening, and that's a lot of pressure to recreate musically what Shostakovich himself wrote down on a score at one point. So, I think obviously it deserves the nomination, and hopefully it wins something. So,
I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. So you also own like we mentioned, a recording and a post-production company, Post-Production Audio in Chicago, Illinois. So what was the business like when you first started? And then how has it changed now that we're in this pandemic with all this work from home stuff going on?
Well, good question. It's gone through a few iterations. I started it in 2006 when I was living in New York, and just started doing classical recording full time. And at that point, it was the same idea. I was packing up all of my own microphones and stands and cables, all of the control room gear, and setting up at venues that had little to no infrastructure for recording at all. So then when I moved to Chicago, I've been doing a little bit of both of those things, but really not much because I'm so busy with the CSO. And since COVID, I think I've done 2 remote recordings, and I have another one scheduled later this month. So it's really slowed down from what it once was. And if I wasn't working with the CSO, I would be doing a lot more. But during COVID, I don't know, maybe not.
Right. And that's, an interesting point that you make. People don't really know or they don't really have the infrastructure to record things, but yet they want to record things, especially like in churches and stuff like that, where it's supposed to be this, acoustic environment where everybody's listening live, and it's not really meant to be recorded, but sometimes you need to record stuff. And, breaking down your whole control room and taking your entire rack of gear out with you is, I've done that. I just did it yesterday, in fact. And that can be very stressful when you're relying on your own gear and everything. Everything's on you. Everything's on you, but it's really exciting too. So, of course, I have to ask, as a audio engineering student myself, what advice do you have to give to, maybe younger or up and coming audio engineers, or anybody really in the music industry who is looking to break in and looking to build a career?
I think at this point, so I graduated many, many years ago. A lot has changed since then, and there's 2 things that have changed a lot. One is the fact that I only had to really know audio inside and out. I knew analog and I knew digital by the time I graduated from Fredonia. At this point, you need to know audio inside and out. You also need to know video inside and out, and you need to know networking. Those are all essential parts. I mean, audio over IP is definitely here to stay, whether it's Dante or Ravenna or whatever protocol. You need to know how to transfer between those formats. You need to know how to route audio from here to there without any trouble, in addition to all the analog. And then video is essential. I would have to know video at this point if I wasn't so engrossed in audio and the music end of things. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I didn't have to have a master's degree. I was interested in pursuing one. I always did want to get a further degree. And the fact that now I don't have one, my wife has a doctoral degree, so I feel like a second rate over here. But I did go through a long and arduous informal training in the recording studios of New York that you can't get now. So it's a bit of a trade-off there between education and experience. You, on the other hand, probably need to look at getting a master's degree. There's so much that you can learn from that, and you can go to a different institution where there might be different approaches, and that's, I think, your only way in. And to students that I see now, I encourage them strongly to continue their education at least to that level. Even a doctoral degree isn't completely unreasonable if you're able to afford it, or at least start on it and work on it part-time. And Henry, the third thing is, this has always been true, and it's what you said earlier. Being involved with music directly is a huge asset, and I think it's essential. I think you have to know music to be in recording, and even in live sound, if you are running a front of house mix or if you're running a monitor mix and the drummer says to you, I need more hi-hat through this section, and you don't know what the bridge, where the bridge falls in the piece or the song, you're kind of in trouble. You need to be able to communicate with them as if you're one of them.
Right. You're an interpreter. You're literally an interpreter for the musician at that point, as a recording engineer, as a producer, even in post-production and mixing and mastering, still really useful. You're right, to have that musical background. So get some lessons, learn an instrument, learn how to read a score, do all that stuff, and it can only help you, right? So that about wraps things up for us today, Charlie. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy, exciting life to come talk with us at SUNY Schenectady here. So thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure, Henry.